What is going on, everybody? It is Hunter with LS Lures. We're back with another freaking Tackle Talk Tuesday for y'all. Today we're going to be talking about finesse jigs, one of my absolute favorite baits to throw all fall. Things are weird, the bass can get real tight-lipped, and there's no better way to catch a bunch of fish and a bunch of big fish than with a finesse jig all fall long, into the winter, into the spring, pretty much all year. These things just catch fish. But we're going to be talking about some awesome sneaky tips on picking out color, where to throw it, what I like to throw it on, what trailers I throw based on our two best-selling finesse jigs there. These things catch them coast to coast. We're going to break it all down for y'all. Make sure you like and subscribe. Watch all the way through, and let me know what you guys want to see next week for the next Tackle Talk Tuesday. Alrighty, y'all. It is early September. The temps are absolutely beautiful. It's starting to cool off. The leaves are just starting to change around here in Nebraska. And one of the absolute best ways to catch a lot of fish and a lot of big fish this fall is chucking around a finesse jig. Temperatures, like I just said, are changing. The bass are on the move. They're everywhere. They're eating just about everything. And as you guys all know, that can flip on a dime and get really tough just as easy as it can get really good. And a finesse jig, like our big wizard jig here, and our little wizard, which we're going to talk about here in a little bit, are a great way to pick apart water, cover a lot of really high percentage areas, and get a lot of those bites that you wouldn't normally get on any other bait. In today's video, we're going to be breaking down why chuck a finesse jig, what trailers we like, where we like to target, the difference between a big wizard and a little wizard, which are two of our top selling finesse jigs here at LS Lures. We're also going to be talking about our favorite colors, the rod and reel we like to throw, what type of line we like to use. And hopefully by the time this video is over, you guys are ready to go out, flip a little finesse jig around, and catch a lot more fish this fall when things get tough. Alrighty, y'all, it's Tackle Talk Tuesday, and you know what the drill is. We've got a hot deal dropping tomorrow, Wednesday the 10th. This deal is going to go until Friday the 12th at midnight, and that means we're knocking 20% off all of our big and little wizard jigs, Wednesday through Friday, ends Friday at midnight, and it is going to be a heck of a deal. Like I said, all little wizard jigs, there's no minimums, there's no nothing. We're just knocking 20% off. So jump onto our website, it's linked down below, and load up so you can catch a ton of fish this fall and utilize this awesome little bugger. We're going to break it down here in just a second, tell you why this little guy is so effective. Also, to circle back, we talked about this in our last video, but for the entire month of September, every $20 you drop on the website right now is going to get you one free football jig. You drop 40 bucks, that's two football jigs, 60, that's three, you know the deal. There's no limits, there's no maximums, there's nothing like that. Like I said, every $20 you spend on the LS website this month, the entire month of September, it ends at midnight, the last day of the month, we are going to give you a free football jig. We've got a bunch of custom ones tied up right now. They're waiting to get shipped out, so every $20 you spend is going to score you a free one of those. We want to hook you guys up, give you the most bang for your buck, and right now, the whole month of September, you're going to get a lot of free football jigs if you spend your money on LS. Alright dudes, before we jump into the nitty-gritty details talking about trailers, setup, line, rods, reels, all that good stuff and where we like to throw these, the first thing I want to kind of break down is why throw a finesse jig in the fall. You know, obviously it's a finesse jig. What makes it a finesse jig is going to be that really tiny skirt it's got on there. It offers a lot less bulk than a standard jig, whether that's a football, a flipping jig, whatever you typically like to throw. And what that means is that, generally speaking, it's going to get more bites. It's a lot less intimidating. It's a lot smaller challenge for those bass to come over and eat. It offers a more natural look, especially in clean water when those fish are really pressured. And with our little wizard jig, it's got dual action on it, which basically what that means is we've got two different skirt cuts on there. We've got a full length skirt cut to where it's going to be nice and slow on the sides with the wings that we've got built into here. And on the front, it's got your traditional finesse cut there where it's going to have that really quick movement every time you twitch it. So every time this jig moves, it's going to have two different types of actions. It's a really great bait to slow work through an area and pick up those fish that typically aren't going to bite anything else. You know, like I said earlier, it's fall. The conditions are really tough right now, or can be really tough right now, depending on the weather. And like you guys know, September, early October, temperatures can range anywhere from the low 90s, mid 90s, all the way down to the 50s, 40s, wherever you're at. But that means that a finesse jig right now can be one of the absolute deadliest baits to throw when the bite's good, when the bite's bad, and everywhere in between, because this thing just gets bit no matter the conditions, and it's a really good bait to work through some of those areas that you know the fish are in. They're just being stubborn and weird. Fish it real slow and get those fish to bite that typically aren't going to bite anything else because they don't want to put forth a lot of effort. They don't want to chase anything down. They just want the weather to even out so they can go chase buzz baits and shad and do all the fun stuff and things. But when those fish get sluggish and the temperatures are weird and they're starting to pull up on their areas that they're supposed to be in, they're just not biting. A finesse jig is a really great way to slow comb through those areas and get those fish to bite that don't want to do a whole lot of work, don't want to invest in a big meal or anything like that. And if you just hit them right on the nose with it and let it sit there, they're going to mosey over. It's too easy to pass up, and they're going to come and grab it. Finesse jigs also do an amazing job of mimicking an entire variety of forage, right? I can swim some of our colors around, mimic small bait fish. I can drag it super slow on the bottom, mimic crawdads, bluegills, whatever it may be. We've got a color that matches everything. And in the fall, dragging something around that looks like a really beat up, janky version of what the fish are feeding on is a great way to pick up some of those bites. When everyone else is trying to power fish, dragging that slow jig, sitting it right in front of their face and mimicking the prey that they're accustomed to eating that just looks like it's beat up, it's too good to pass up, is a great way to get a ton of bites. All right, y'all, so now we've broken down the whys of finesse jig fishing, picking up those fish that don't necessarily want to bite, they don't want to move a whole lot, and it's a great way to pick apart those areas. We're going to talk about the wheres, and the beauty of this bait is you can fish it absolutely everywhere. It's effective through every piece of cover, whether that's brush piles, grass edges, wood, rock, dock, everything those fish are going to be on in the fall, this bait works around. So depending on where you're at in the country, depending on what you like to fish, this is a great bait to comb back through those areas that you've been fishing a bunch of other baits all summer long and follow those fish as they start to transition up. It's effective from 30 plus feet of water down all the way up to 6 inches of water, depending on the size. We've got a couple different ones. We offer 5/16, 3/8, and 7/16. But the biggest thing I want to hammer home, guys, is that this bait is absolutely effective around every piece of cover. So if your fish are super shallow around docks, this is a great way to switch up, show them a different profile when everyone else and their grandma is throwing a buzz bait, throwing a full-size flipping jig, flipping a beaver and a Senko and stuff like that. This is a great way to pick through those docks, follow those fish up as they start to go back into some of those different shallower pockets and whatnot, following the bait. If you've got a grass lake, this is a great bait to follow those grass lines, to fish the outside edge, to fish some of the patchier ones, flipping around the outside, especially in clean water. Again, when everyone's throwing different types of bigger baits and worms and stuff like that, this is just a really good natural presentation that's super easy. It can mimic a bunch of different forage and absolutely catch the piss out of them this time of year. But I'm not going to break down too much. There's no real secret there. This bait fish is good around every single piece of cover. So when it comes to your individual lake and where you're at in the country, fish it around where you've been catching them, fish it around those traditional fall spots, junk fish with it, flip it at absolutely everything and figure out what they want, where they're at. But the good news is for you that this bait will catch them on absolutely everything. There's no special fancy way to work it, try slow dragging it, try dead sticking it, hop it, swim it, do whatever you want, skip it around. It's going to get bit, it's going to get a ton of bites, and it's going to work around every piece of cover. So whether you've got riprap banks and you're dragging it counting rocks, whether you're skipping it way up underneath the docks or you're pitching it down grass lines, this bait is going to be effective at every piece of cover. If you're around fish, it's just going to get bit, guys. So there's no secrets to where to throw it. The biggest thing I want to push home here is throw it around everything, figure out where those fish are, and it's one of the best ways to get a lot of bigger bites this time of year. When those fish are getting real picky and finicky, this is going to get it done on your lake. Moving on to the next part of the video, guys, and arguably one of the most important parts of this video, in my opinion, is going to be picking the right finesse jig. Here at LS Lures, we've got two that I think are absolutely kick-ass. They catch giant fish, they're different than everything else on the market, and that's going to be our Little Wizard jig and our Big Wizard jig. You guys might look at these. We're going to throw some close-ups right here. What you're going to notice between the two of these is just going to be the hook size. Everything else is pretty much identical. The biggest difference is going to be your Little Wizard jig has a 2/0 hook and a trimmed brush guard that's a little bit finessier. Your Big Wizard jig is going to have an untrimmed brush guard and it's going to have a 4/0 hook. Both of these have premium hooks in them. We put the best stuff in there for you guys because we truly do care about you. We don't want to fish with crap. We don't want you guys to fish with crap. And both of these jigs are absolutely capable of catching the biggest fish in your lake with zero worry about hooks bending out, hook points rolling over. Whatever crap you deal with right now with the jigs you're using, you're not going to have to worry about with these, okay? They're all hand tied, they're hand painted, they're epoxied for the brush guards, there's no super glue, no bull crap. They're absolutely awesome, and these things are tough as nails. The biggest difference, though, is going to be that hook size. And I'm going to break down why we did what we did and what's going to make the biggest difference when I'm picking which one I'm going to throw, which one I'm going to start with, and how I'm going to break down my lake with them. The first thing I want to think about, y'all, when I'm picking, Big Wizard, Little Wizard, is going to be what size of fish and what types of fish I'm going after in my body of water. If I'm around larger fish, specifically largemouth, and there's not as many smallmouth in my lake, I'm typically going to go with the Big Wizard. The Big Wizard allows me to put a bigger trailer on the back. It's got a little bit more bulk to it. The skirt's just a little bit longer to cover that hook there compared to your Little Wizard. where it just offers a slightly bigger meal. It allows me to throw bigger trailers, and it allows me to really key in on those largemouth if that's what's in the lake. Not saying the little wizard won't catch them. The big wizard just allows me to key in, give a little bit bigger profile, especially when I'm targeting bigger largemouth. Now, if I'm in a lake that has a lot of smallmouth in it, or multi-species, where I can catch spotted bass, largemouth, smallmouth, they're all mixed in, you can go either way. The little wizard is typically going to be my go-to though, because the smaller package allows me to put a smaller trailer on there, keep it a little bit smaller, and it really kind of helps keep those smallmouth included into there. Not saying a smallmouth you won't catch smallmouth on a big wizard. I've caught plenty. I've got some really big ones on a big wizard. It just seems like that little wizard kind of keeps the whole group included. It gets a ton of bites. It gets a lot of bites when I'm around all three species there, spotted, smallmouth, and largemouth. And it allows me to not worry that I'm going through those areas with too big of a jig and I'm missing out on some of those smallmouth that might be living there that I want in my live well. The next thing I'm considering, guys, when I'm going through picking these is what kind of forage are in my area. You know, you're not always going to have that opportunity. Sometimes you just have to guess. But if you can, poke around on the banks, get an idea, keep an eye on what the fish are coughing up. Because if the fish are coughing up really itty-bitty crawdads, the little wizard's probably going to be your go-to. If the bluegill in your lake are really itty-bitty small, go with the little wizard. If the crawdads are really big, or the bluegill are a little bit larger or whatnot, go with the big wizard. But if you can have any kind of idea on what that forage is that those fish are keying in on, it's going to make a huge difference in what I'm throwing. Now, if I have no idea, flip a coin. You know, if you think based on your mental calculations that the forage is a little bit bigger, go with the big wizard. And if it's not getting bit, you can always downsize. If you go with a little wizard and you're getting bit really good, but they're not quite the size that you're looking for, jump up to a bigger wizard, throw a bigger trailer on it. The biggest thing at the end of the day with that, guys, is just going to be taking your best guess, using your context clues, looking in the water, seeing what the bait is, checking out what the fish are coughing up, and that's going to give you a really good idea on how big a jig you're supposed to be throwing, what color to use, and which one of these two to go with there. The last thing I really consider, guys, when I'm trying to pick between a big wizard and a little wizard is going to be the water temp. Right now it's early September. The big wizard's going to be my go-to just because that water temp's a little bit warmer. So we're starting to see that transition where the water's going to cool off over the next couple months. And right now, being that it's warmer, I'm going to throw that bigger wizard more. Those fish are still more apt to eat bigger profiles, so you can still catch them on a mop jig, a full-size football, and stuff like that. But this is just a finesse-ier profile. It's a great way to get bit when it's tougher, but it's still a big, bulky enough profile that if the water's warm and they can handle a little bit bigger meal, this is a great one to go with. Now, as things start to cool off a little bit and that bite gets really tough, you know, when it's low 50s, high 40s, even mid 40s, I've caught them when it's below zero outside and the water temps, half the lake's frozen, on a little wizard. But as it gets colder, I seem to do better on that little wizard. It's a lot smaller, it's a really easy to manage profile, and it's really easy for those fish to just mosey on over, pick it up. It's not too big, it's not a big hassle for them, and it will catch fish all winter long. I live here in Nebraska, our water freezes over, we get a sheet of ice on everything, but I've caught fish on this jig right here, the little wizard, all winter long on open pockets on these ponds when half of the lake's frozen over, there's snow on the ground, and I'm wearing bibs, a winter coat, gloves, I got 15 hand warmers taped to my body, and this jig still gets bit. So as we make that transition to late fall, early winter, and stuff like that, all the way through winter and spring, the little wizard seems to get bit. Threw it on the ground. The little wizard seems to get bit just a little bit better, and I feel more confident knowing that in those colder temps, I'm going to get more bites on a little wizard than compared to the big one. Play around with it. Again, this all factors into what size of fish you're targeting. If you're going after 5+ pounders, you're in a trophy lake, your water's not that cold, throw the big wizard. You know, there's no reason to throw something even smaller if you're targeting larger fish. But let your fishery tell you what they want. Let the species in your area dictate that. If you're around more smallmouth, spotted bass, smaller fish, stuff like that, the little wizard's going to be your best friend. If you're trying to really key in on largemouth and some of those bigger spotted bass, go with your big wizard, and always be sure to try and keep an eye out for what those fish are feeding on. The next thing that goes hand in hand, guys, with picking the right jig there is going to be what color of jig I'm throwing. You know, a lot of guys seem to say there's a secret in the fall. You got to throw more orange, you got to throw this, you got to throw that, you got to throw white. They completely forget that fish eat crawdads and bluegill all the way through the fall too, and all they want to talk about is throwing a spook and throwing a buzzbait and doing all the fun power fishing stuff. But when the bite gets tough, 9 times out of 10 you're going to beat them with something like this, because that doesn't always work in the fall. And when the top water temp gets hot and that top water bite shuts off, this is a great way to go right behind those guys and pick up fish all day long that they're not catching on their power baits because the fish simply aren't eating them. But when it comes to color, guys, the biggest thing that I kind of keep in mind when I'm trying to pick out what I'm going to go through, we've got a whole variety of them. They're all linked below. Make sure you check them out. But the biggest thing I want to look at is what does my bottom look like and what kind of cover am I fishing. That's going to dictate more often than not what I'm throwing, where I'm throwing it, and what color I'm going with. What I mean by that is if I'm fishing green, grassy bottom, clear sand, stuff like that, I'm going to go with a more natural, clear color. If you've ever picked up a crawdad from any lake, more often than not, the crawdads and the bluegill and all the bait match the bottom because that's where they live and that's how they hide the best. So if I'm going through and I'm throwing a bait that is completely off kill from what the bottom looks like, I might not get as many bites because my bait simply does not look like the forage that those fish are typically looking at. This is also a great cheat code for if you're fishing clear water and you're around grass. Just a good way to get bit. If you look at anything that lives in the grass that those fish feed on, typically more translucent, typically more green, just because the prey fits in just fine. You don't have to worry about, well, what if it blends in too much? It's not going to. These fish can eat bluegill and crawdads and stuff that are super good at hiding. My jig can't think, it doesn't know how to hide, and it's just bumbling along. So I like to throw jigs that match the colors of the bottom where I'm fishing at. Now, if I'm around rock, mud bottom, clay, stuff like that, fishing around docks, I typically like darker colors. You know, PB&Js are colored jelly brews, rust, that more craw colored stuff, black and blues, stuff like that. I feel like that matches the bottom a lot better than, say, some of our more translucent ones. I'm not saying you can't catch fish around all the same stuff with more translucent colors. I'm just saying my go-to, the way I like to break that down if I'm at a new body of water or I'm just going out and want to catch fish, I typically try and match my jig to the color of the bottom and the grass and the cover I'm fishing because that's going to do the best job of mimicking the forage that those fish are feeding on. Now, I'm not going to act like this is a big surprise. Another key factor when I'm fishing is going to be the water clarity. If the cleaner the water, the more translucent you want your bait to be. So our color Riddler, our colors Dirty Larry are great in gin clear water. If I get into dirtier, more stained water, our colors Roadkill, Contusion, our darker colors are going to do a lot better job just because they contrast and they're easier for those fish to see. So if you're fishing muddy water around grass, don't throw a super translucent bait because they're just not going to be able to see as well. Throw black and blue, use common sense, do all the stuff and things there. But like I said, the first thing I look at is what's the bottom color, what kind of cover am I fishing, what's the bait going to look like that they're eating, match that. And then the second thing is going to be what's the water clarity, does this make sense what I'm throwing? The dirtier the water, the darker the bait, the cleaner the water, the more translucent you want to go. If you do that, you're just going to catch more fish. If they're feeding heavily on craws, throw a craw color. If they're feeding on bluegill, throw something that's more green pumpkin. And if you don't know, just guess, match the water clarity and the cover, and you're going to catch fish. All right, dudes, so now that we've kind of broken down what jigs to throw, what colors we're throwing, where we're targeting, which is pretty much everywhere in the fall, we're going to talk about what rods and reels I like to throw, what I feel is most effective, what's going to catch you the most fish, and what's going to land you the most fish every time you set the hook. Before we dive into this, guys, just to clarify, I feel like these are both very interchangeable. Just get one, get both, do whatever you want, but both of them will work for each one. I just throw both of mine on different setups there. It's a little bit easier for me. I feel it makes me a little bit more effective on the water. I don't know why, it just does, and this is what I like chucking them on. But to start off, my big wizard rod is a 7.2 Shimano Zodius rod. It's a medium heavy, extra fast, but this is a great rod for chucking that big wizard around. It's got just a little bit lighter wire hook than that big wizard. Like I said, this one's a 4-aught, but it's got just a little bit lighter wire. Still premium, but I feel like that 7.2 gives me a little bit more distance. It's a super sensitive rod in that Zodius, and the Zodius compared to the next one I'm about to talk about has just a little bit more tip to it, so it's easy for me to get really good hook sets, absorb it just a little bit better, and fight those fish really effective. Caught a ton of big fish this year with the big wizard on this rod. I've got a high gear ratio reel. What brand you use doesn't really matter. It doesn't make me a difference, but something high gear ratio, 7, 8, whatever it is. A 7's perfect, picks up that line super fast after you set the hook. And as far as the line goes, it depends on the cover I'm fishing, but I'm running anywhere from 15 to 20. 20 if I'm fishing brush piles and around some really nasty docks with it, 17 for most stuff, and then if I'm in really clean water, I'm fishing open water scenarios, or those fish are really beat up, I'll jump down to 15, straight fluorocarbon, pick something nice. Don't skimp out on this if you can, guys, especially for your finesse jig, because when you're not getting a ton of bites, I don't want to throw a bad line that's going to fray and break easier, because on those days where you're only getting 6 bites, 5 bites if you're lucky sometimes, that can make all the difference in the world between cashing a check and going home really sad because you broke one off because you got bad line, or you missed one because you couldn't feel anything, really invest in a nice setup, guys. But a 7.2 Zodius with a high gear ratio reel and good fluorocarbon on there between 15 and 20 pound test is going to be your best friend for that big wizard. This will also work for a little wizard as well. The next one I'm going to be talking about, guys, is a 7.1 Shimano Intenza rod. This is a little bit older. They don't make this exact model anymore, but it has been an absolute workhorse for me. It's a 7.1 medium heavy. It's just a little bit stiffer than that Intenza. That little wizard has just a little bit stouter hook. It's not a super stout hook, but for a finesse jig, it's just a little bit stouter than that big wizard hook is. And this rod really lets me pop them, get that in there no matter the distance. It's super easy too because it's a little bit shorter rod. I can get in some of those tighter spots with it. I can pitch it around super easy, especially with a light 5/16 ounce jig. Again, high gear ratio reel. This is like a 7-to-1, I believe. It's a Daiwa Tula SV, and again, 15 to 20 pound fluorocarbon, 20 pound around that heavy cover, because just because it's a finesse jig does not mean they cannot ruin your day when they get you wrapped up because you decided to skip around docks and stuff like that. So 20 pound around metal and brush piles, 17 pound for most stuff. A lot of guys are going to call me crazy for that. I catch plenty of fish on 17 pound test line in clean water with a finesse jig. And if I'm in really clear water, those fish are pressured. Throw 15. If you want to throw 12, if you're feeling really dangerous, go for it. I don't care. I set the hook really hard, and I like fishing my finesse jigs around stuff that are really gnarly because most guys won't do it. And I feel like kind of cancels out when you've got heavier line and a really small jig in that cover. I would rather land everything I set the hook on than fish 12 pound test around a brush pile or a metal dock piling, set the hook 5 times, and break off on 3 of them because I just have way too light a setup there. So do not be afraid to throw a little bit heavier line, especially on a finesse jig when you're fishing around that nasty stuff. But shorter rods, 7.1, 7.2, 7.3, medium heavy, you don't have to jump up to a heavy. These hooks are light, they're not absolute gaffs like we've got on our swim jig and our flipping jigs there. So medium heavy will do you just fine. They're more sensitive, they're easier to fish all day long, and you're going to be really happy pitching that around, setting the hook, and not losing fish because you're not throwing 10 or 12 pound test on it. Now, if you wanted to, I know a lot of guys run straight braid on these to a fluorocarbon leader. Absolutely, run 30 pound braid. I probably wouldn't go any heavier. I would definitely not go any lighter because the lighter braid you use, the more likely it is to cinch into your spool. But a 30 pound braid to a fluorocarbon leader is another super effective way to feel every single bite, especially when the bite is tough and they're picking it up really light. But straight fluorocarbon is typically my absolute go-to for that. It gets a ton of bites, 15, 17, 20 pound fluorocarbon, you'll catch a ton of fish. Alrighty, y'all, before these gnats absolutely chew me up alive, the last thing I want to talk about with y'all is going to be picking out a trailer for these two baits. Like I said, the Big Wizard, which we're going to be talking about first, is a little bit easier to fit a much bigger trailer on there, and you can make it really species specific based on how big a trailer you want to go with. I didn't bring any trailers to show you guys today. You guys are perfectly capable of figuring out exactly what you want on the back, because if you like a certain soft plastic, more often than not it's going to work on the back of a Big Wizard there. A couple of my favorites are going to be a Rage Craw, a Creature Hog from Berkeley, some kind of Sweet Beaver from Reaction Innovations, a Chigger Craw. Whatever it may be, any kind of full-size craw or beaver that you typically like to throw, flipping around on a Texas rig or on a flip and jig trailer, will work just fine on a Big Wizard. I feel like, especially with the Big Wizard, since it has that big hook, throwing a full-size trailer on the back is a really effective way to get a lot of bites, and a lot of really big bites, especially when things are weird, because those fish get so accustomed to a full jig skirt and a big bulky profile, because nobody out there trims their brush guards and trims their skirts down, and they throw the biggest trailer they can on the back. So throwing a trailer that's still full size and offers a really good bulky meal with very little skirt material on there is a great way to catch a lot of those fish that are just so accustomed to seeing the full thing but still want a big meal. So a Big Wizard jig with a full-size Chigger Craw or Rage Craw is especially great up north for big largemouth. It's super effective down south too, just because they don't see a jig like this a whole lot. This is considered like an Ozark region jig, and it performs super well around there, but it also works everywhere else in the country because it's got a really janky skirt. It's got about half the skirt material that most finesse jigs have. You know, I'm going to go on a rant really quick. Every finesse jig on the market right now has the same lion's cone cut on the front there, and what that does is it slows it down, and it's supposed to have a little quick action, but they all look the same. Our little Wizard jig and our Big Wizard jig both have, you guys have seen the close-up, a very small cut skirt on the front. It's got very little material, and it's got that dual action from the long tabs, from the short tabs, where you're getting a quick twitch and that slow rise at the same time. So throwing a big trailer like you would on any other jig on the back of this big wizard is a great way when those fish are super pressured. They still want a big meal, but they're just beat up and they won't eat a full-size flipping jig or whatever. It's also a great way to really kind of show off that trailer and present it in a way that they don't typically see it, right? Again, most jigs are going to cover up most of that trailer, and the only thing those fish see are the claws. This jig does a really good job of showing the beef, you know, the bulk of that trailer along with the action, and giving that little kind of skirt action on the sides to really accent that. So in terms of a big wizard go, big chigger craw, a rage craw, whatever it may be, match it to the fish you're trying to catch, right? If I'm going for smallmouth, I'm not going to throw a full-size rage craw on the back. Throw something a little bit smaller, throw a creature hog, throw some kind of beaver bait, throw a menace grub that's got a little bit smaller action, but keep it a little bit more narrow and compact there. If I'm going after big largemouth, throw something that's got some thump to it, throw something that's got some scent, and really beef this thing up, because it does a great job and it shows them something completely different. Now, going into the little wizard, it's the same concept except just a little bit smaller there, right? You can throw any of the same trailers, just shortened down on the back of this thing, but a couple of my favorites are going to be a baby menace grub from Strike King, you know, a chigger craw bit way down, some kind of chunk style bait, a small beaver like a baby D-bomb, or a smallie beaver, something like that, all work really good on the back of this. But the last thing you want to do, since this has such a small hook in it, it's only a little 2-aught there, is throw something that hangs way off the back, because what those fish are going to do is they're going to come up, they're going to grab that trailer way behind, and they're going to pick it up, and every time you swing to set the hook, they're gone, right? Your trailer's ripped off, you're pissed, you're shaking your head, kicking the ground, screaming at your partner, whatever it may be there. But the biggest thing with this is just matching the size of that trailer to your profile. Now, don't be afraid when you're throwing smaller trailers on this and say, oh, it's just a smallmouth jig. It's not. The biggest fish ever caught on a little wizard was 9 pounds 2 ounces out of Kansas, and it was with a baby D-bomb on the back, bit in half. It was super small, and it was 9 pounds and 2 ounces. I was with him when he caught it, and it was one of the craziest things I've ever seen, because this is not a big jig, and it gets absolutely huge bites. So with that, again, pick out whatever you like, slap it on the back. I like to add scent to it, throw some max scent, do whatever it is, but it seems like with that little profile there, throwing a much smaller trailer and just making sure that it matches it is going to give you the greatest success. And also with a little wizard jig, I don't like to throw anything that has a crazy action on the back, because I just don't think it looks right with such a small profile. If you go out and look at the water behind me at any of the small bait fish, none of the small bait fish are doing anything crazy in the water, right? They're all very small, they're all very close to the body, it's all very subtle action. So with such a small bait, keep your action really subtle too, and I feel like you'll do a lot better with it. And as I was trying to say before my camera overheated, you can get away with a little bit more action on that big wizard just because it's a bigger profile. It looks like a bigger crawdad, baitfish, whatever it may be, and it doesn't look quite as odd as a little wizard would with an absolute crap ton of action off the back. So with that bigger wizard, you can throw something that's got some more kick to it. You don't have to, but I typically like throwing a little bit bigger profile with a little bit more kick to it on that bigger wizard there. Alrighty, y'all, that is all I've got for you guys today. Hopefully you guys pick something up, because I know you're going to pick up a lot more fishing on a finesse jig this fall. The weather's weird, the fish are getting funky, and there's no better bait, like I've said 50 billion times, than throwing a finesse jig this fall. I absolutely love slacklining them on it. It's a great way to get a lot of big bites, especially when things get tough and the weather gets warm. They seem to kind of shut off. But make sure you guys like and subscribe if you like this video. Share it with all your buddies. Everything that I've talked about this entire video, rods, reels, jigs, trailers, whatever it may be, is going to be linked below. Make sure you check everything out down there. Make sure you pick some of these up, because they're going to be on sale all freaking week, Wednesday through Friday there. So pick these up. It's a hell of a deal. We've got a ton of them on stock right now in every single color we have to offer. But we'll see you guys next week for another Tackle Talk Tuesday and another smoking deal. Pick these up. Make sure you subscribe, and we'll see you next week.